The brain is constantly reshaping itself in response to what we focus on. This capacity is known as neuroplasticity. While neuroplasticity is often associated with learning new skills or recovering from injury, it is just as relevant in how we shape identity, decision-making, and long-term emotional patterns. Self-focus, intentional inward attention, acts as a powerful trigger for this reshaping process. When we deliberately turn our focus inward, particularly in moments of solitude or silence, we activate specific neural circuits that govern self-awareness and adaptive learning. The medial prefrontal cortex, a region associated with introspection and identity, lights up when we reflect on our own behaviors, emotions, and goals. This area communicates with the default mode network DMN, which is active during rest and internal thought. While the DMN was once thought to be simply idle mode, it is now understood as a critical network for simulating possibilities, integrating past experiences, and constructing future outcomes, all key components of behavior change. Self-directed attention recruits neurochemicals that support plasticity, for example, focused introspection, especially when coupled with novelty or emotional salient, triggers the release of acetylcholine in the cortex. Acetylcholine acts like a highlighter in the brain, marking certain circuits for change. The more consistently we engage in self-directed reflection, the more we reinforce adaptive pathways over reactive or habitual ones. This makes self-focus a practical tool for personal growth, not just a psychological strategy, but a physiological training of the brain itself. Additionally, when attention is not scattered across external demands, social validation, comparison, noise, we gain access to more stable dopamine signaling. Dopamine is the neuromodulator of motivation, but its effects depend heavily on whether it is triggered by external stimuli or internally generated milestones. When we focus on ourselves, align with a clear internal purpose, and monitor our own progress, dopamine is released in a more sustainable way. This supports long-term change because the reward is not dependent on someone else's approval, but on the brain's own internal scoreboard. Over time, this builds a loop where intrinsic motivation rewires the brain to favor self-initiated effort and resilience. There is also a defensive function to self-focus. In a world where attention is constantly hijacked, the act of bringing awareness inward acts as a form of cognitive protection. It reduces susceptibility to emotional contagion, stress reactivity, and impulsive decisions. Studies have shown that people who regularly practice inward, focused attention, through journaling, meditation, or simple silent reflection, have stronger connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center. This improved connectivity leads to better emotional regulation and a reduced likelihood of acting on impulse. Importantly, self-focus doesn't mean narcissism or self-absorption. From a neurological standpoint, it is about allocating cognitive resources toward monitoring, updating, and optimizing one's internal state. Just as muscles respond to targeted resistance, the brain responds to targeted awareness. Focusing on oneself, done consistently and deliberately, becomes a form of mental resistance training. Silence is a powerful tool for regulating the nervous system, yet its benefits are often underappreciated in a world constantly filled with noise and stimuli. From a physiological perspective, silence provides the brain and body with a unique opportunity to recalibrate. It is during moments of quiet that the parasympathetic nervous system, often referred to as the rest and digest system, can take over from the sympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the fight or flight response. This shift is crucial for restoring balance and reducing chronic stress, which, if left unchecked, can contribute to various health problems. When we find ourselves in a quiet environment, there is a noticeable reduction in external distractions. This reduction in sensory input allows the brain to enter a state of heightened awareness and introspection, facilitating deeper levels of processing. The vagus nerve, a key component of the parasympathetic system, plays a critical role in this process. By activating the vagus nerve, silence promotes calm, reduces heart rate, and lowers blood pressure, all of which are essential components of nervous system regulation. The more we engage in moments of silence, the more we strengthen our ability to control the autonomic processes that govern our stress response. Neuroscientifically, silence helps to reduce the level of cortisol, a hormone released during stressful events. High levels of cortisol can be harmful over time, leading to immune system suppression, increased inflammation, and higher susceptibility to illness. However, engaging in regular periods of silence, whether through meditation, deep breathing, or simply sitting in stillness, has been shown to lower cortisol levels, offering a natural counterbalance to the demands of modern life. Silence allows the body to shift from a state of heightened alertness to one of recovery, promoting overall well-being. In addition to its physiological benefits, silence also provides the mental space needed to process emotions and thoughts. In the absence of constant input from the outside world, the brain can more effectively manage emotional overload and clear cognitive clutter. Silence allows for the consolidation of memories and the integration of new information, both of which are essential for emotional and cognitive resilience. This process of internal reflection can lead to greater emotional regulation, as individuals are better able to identify and address the root causes of stress or anxiety. By providing a break from external demands, silence enhances our ability to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively to challenging situations. The brain's default mode network DMN, a network of regions that activates when the mind is at rest, is particularly active during periods of silence. The DMN is crucial for self-reflection, mind wandering, and introspection. It is during these quieter moments that we are able to access deeper levels of cognitive and emotional processing, which ultimately supports greater self-awareness. This introspective ability can lead to improved decision-making and a more accurate understanding of one's emotions, relationships, and priorities. Furthermore, silence fosters a state of mindfulness where the individual can observe their thoughts and feelings without immediate judgment. This mindful awareness is associated with reduced anxiety and enhanced emotional regulation, as individuals become less reactive to their thoughts and more adept at responding in a balanced way. Silence, when practiced regularly, strengthens our ability to stay calm and centered in the face of external stressors, contributing to improved mental health and overall life satisfaction. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter deeply involved in motivation, reward, and pleasure. It's often discussed in the context of external rewards, such as receiving praise or material success. However, dopamine's role goes far beyond external validation. Internal validation, the act of recognizing and affirming one's own worth and efforts, can be just as potent in triggering dopamine release, fostering long-term motivation, and creating sustainable patterns of behavior. The brain's reward system, which relies heavily on dopamine, is designed to reinforce behaviors that increase survival and well-being. Typically, when we receive external validation, whether through accolades, compliments, or rewards, the brain releases dopamine. This motivates us to repeat those behaviors, reinforcing the desire for approval. However, over time, seeking validation from external sources can lead to an unhealthy cycle of dependency. We become reliant on the opinions and judgments of others to feel good about ourselves, which can increase stress and reduce our sense of agency. Internal validation, on the other hand, creates a more self-sufficient and resilient system of motivation. By focusing on internal measures of success and self-worth, individuals can tap into dopamine's positive effects without the need for external reinforcement. This process works by recognizing personal progress, acknowledging efforts, and celebrating small victories that might otherwise go unnoticed. When we validate ourselves, the brain still rewards us with dopamine, but the source of that reward comes from within. This form of self-generated dopamine is more stable and sustainable. Unlike external validation, which can be fleeting or inconsistent, internal validation allows us to maintain a steady source of motivation. The key here is that dopamine is not just a chemical reaction to receiving external rewards, but is also a reaction to fulfilling our own standards, goals, and aspirations. When we set personal goals, whether they are related to work, health, or relationships, and meet them, the the brain releases dopamine in response to the achievement of these goals. This creates a sense of fulfillment and encourages further action, independent of external feedback. The relationship between dopamine and internal validation also extends to emotional resilience. By learning to derive satisfaction from within, we build a stronger internal framework for dealing with setbacks and challenges. Rather than relying on external praise or recognition to feel valued, we learn to measure our own progress and growth, which reduces the impact of external criticism or failure. The act of internal validation rewires the brain's reward system, making it less susceptible to the emotional roller coaster of external opinions and more anchored in the satisfaction of personal achievement. Neuroscientifically, self-validation has profound effects on the brain's neural circuits, particularly in areas associated with self-regulation, executive function, and emotional control. When we validate ourselves, we activate the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for planning, decision making, and regulating emotions. This activation helps to strengthen the pathways that promote self-control and emotional intelligence, making it easier to maintain focus on long-term goals even when faced with challenges or distractions. Moreover, internal validation encourages a growth mindset, the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and perseverance. This mindset is associated with more adaptive responses to failure, greater persistence, and a more flexible approach to learning. In this context, dopamine acts as a motivator not just for immediate rewards, but also for the ongoing process of self-improvement. When we internalize the recognition of our progress, we continuously reinforce the neural circuits that support resilience, persistence, and the desire to keep moving forward, regardless of external feedback. Attention is one of the brain's most precious and limited cognitive resources. In an environment filled with constant distractions, our ability to focus on a single task or thought becomes increasingly valuable. Neuroscientifically, attention involves complex networks of brain regions that coordinate to filter, prioritize, and direct cognitive energy toward particular stimuli or tasks. However, this capacity is far from infinite. Like any limited resource, it can be depleted, and when mismanaged, it can lead to cognitive fatigue, reduced performance, and poor decision-making. At the heart of attention lies the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for higher-order functions like decision-making, impulse control, and goal-directed behavior. This brain region helps us maintain focus and resist distractions, but it also operates within the constraints of our cognitive bandwidth. The more demands placed on our attention, the more strained this system becomes. Our brains are wired to focus on one thing at a time, even though external stimuli often encourage multitasking. When we divide our attention between multiple tasks or streams of information, we lower the efficiency of our cognitive resources. Research shows that multitasking, contrary to popular belief, is not a sign of superior cognitive ability. Instead, it leads to a decline in performance, as the brain has to rapidly switch between tasks, which consumes additional energy. The idea that attention is limited is supported by the concept of cognitive load, which refers to the mental effort required to process information. When cognitive load becomes too high, the brain's ability to efficiently focus on a task diminishes. This explains why, after prolonged periods of concentration or when juggling multiple tasks, we experience mental fatigue. Cognitive overload can result in decreased working memory capacity, meaning we can hold fewer pieces of information in our minds at once. This makes it harder to make decisions, recall details, and learn new information effectively. Moreover, attention isn't just about what we focus on. It's also about what we ignore. The brain is constantly bombarded with sensory input, but it has evolved mechanisms to filter out irrelevant or unimportant stimuli. This is where selective attention comes into play. Selective attention allows us to prioritize certain information and ignore distractions, such as background noise or irrelevant visual cues. However, because selective attention is an active process, it requires effort and resources. When we are exposed to constant distractions, such as the notifications on our phones or the noise in a busy environment, the brain has to work harder to maintain focus on the task at hand. Over time, This constant effort can lead to mental fatigue, decreasing our overall cognitive capacity. The depletion of attention is also linked to dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward. Dopamine helps to drive our attention toward rewarding stimuli. However, when the brain is overstimulated with too many distractions, dopamine levels can become dysregulated, leading to difficulties in focusing on tasks that require sustained effort or delayed gratification. The immediate rewards of switching between distractions such as checking social media or responding to messages can hijack the brain's attention system, making it harder to focus on long-term goals or tasks that require deep concentration. Research in attention and cognitive neuroscience has led to the concept of attention residue, which refers to the cognitive residue left behind when we switch between tasks. When we move from one task to another, part of our attention remains stuck on the previous task, making it harder to fully engage with the new task. This residue can accumulate over time, diminishing our ability to focus and perform effectively. The more frequently we switch between tasks, the greater the residue, and the less efficient our cognitive performance becomes. Understanding attention as a limited resource highlights the importance of managing where we direct our focus. Protecting our attention involves consciously minimizing distractions, organizing tasks based on priority, and allowing ourselves breaks to replenish our cognitive energy. By recognizing the limits of our attentional capacity, we can use it more strategically, optimizing our productivity and well-being. Speech is not just a tool for communication, it is a powerful mechanism for shaping thought. The act of articulating thoughts, emotions, and ideas in a controlled and deliberate manner helps refine our cognitive processes and influences the way we experience and understand the world. Controlled speech, thoughtful, measured, and intentional speech, creates a feedback loop that affects our internal dialogue and emotional regulation, ultimately shaping the way we think and behave. The connection between speech and thought is deeply rooted in the brain's neural architecture. The Broca's area, responsible for language production in the prefrontal cortex, which governs higher cognitive functions like decision, making, planning, and impulse control, work in tandem when we speak. When we consciously control what we say, we engage these brain regions in ways that strengthen our ability to regulate not only our external communications, but also our internal thought patterns. By carefully choosing our words, we reinforce certain cognitive processes over others, which can have profound effects on how we view ourselves and interact with others. For instance, controlled speech can help reframe negative or irrational thoughts. Cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), a well-established therapeutic technique, hinges on the principle that our language influences our thoughts and, in turn, our emotions. By altering the language we use to describe situations, whether internally or externally, we can change our emotional responses. When we consciously shift from saying, "I can't do this," to "this will be challenging, but I can find a way," we reframe the situation in a more constructive light. This shift in speech not only changes our thought process, but also enhances our ability to problem, solve, and manage stress. The process of articulating thoughts aloud also helps to clarify them. Internal dialogue, while essential, can sometimes be murky or disorganized. Speaking allows us to slow down, reflect, and refine our thoughts. When we explain something to someone else or even speak our thoughts aloud to ourselves, we make abstract ideas more concrete. This clarity fosters better decision-making and problem-solving because we are more likely to spot inconsistencies or flaws in our reasoning when we verbalize them. This is why people often say, "I just need to talk it out." The act of speaking can be a form of cognitive processing that helps us resolve confusion or arrive at clearer conclusions. Moreover, controlled speech promotes emotional regulation. Speaking thoughtfully allows us to control the way we express our emotions, reducing the likelihood of impulsive reactions or misunderstandings. For example, when we feel anger rising, taking a moment to pause and carefully choose our words gives us space to regulate the intensity of the emotion and communicate it more constructively. The prefrontal cortex, which helps us inhibit impulsive behavior, plays a key role in this process. By slowing down our speech and thinking before responding, we create a space between emotional impulse and action, enabling us to manage difficult emotions more effectively. The power of controlled speech extends to self-talk as well. How we speak to ourselves, internally and aloud, shapes our self-concept and emotional well-being. Self-affirmations, for instance, are a form of controlled speech that can have a significant impact on self-esteem and motivation. By consciously speaking positively about our abilities and potential, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with confidence and self-efficacy. This process is not about wishful thinking, but about training the brain to focus on strengths and possibilities rather than weaknesses and limitations. In social contexts, controlled speech also influences how we are perceived by others. The way we express ourselves verbally can affect how others view our competence, emotional intelligence, and ability to manage stress. Thoughtful, composed speech tends to convey confidence, clarity, and poise, while erratic or impulsive speech can suggest uncertainty or emotional instability. By managing our speech, we not only influence our own thoughts, but also shape the dynamics of our relationships and social interactions. Ultimately, controlled speech is a reflection of controlled thought. When we take the time to speak with intention, we reinforce clarity, emotional regulation, and cognitive coherence. By consciously curating our speech, we actively shape our internal processes, cultivating a more mindful, thoughtful, and deliberate approach to life. Observation is a foundational skill in mastering any domain, whether it's a physical activity, intellectual pursuit, or emotional intelligence. The ability to observe deeply, without rushing to judgment or action, enhances learning and provides critical insights that can accelerate mastery. Neuroscientifically, observation helps to activate regions of the brain responsible for pattern recognition, motor learning, and decision making. When we observe carefully, we are not merely watching. We are actively engaging in a process that refines our understanding, sharpens our abilities, and guides our future actions. At the heart of this process is the brain's capacity for mirror neurons. These neurons are activated not only when we perform an action, but also when we observe someone else performing that same action. This mechanism allows us to learn by imitation, a key feature of human development and expertise acquisition. For example, a musician may learn by watching a master play an instrument, or an athlete may improve by studying the techniques of a seasoned competitor. The brain mirrors the movements and strategies of others, allowing us to internalize the behaviors and strategies that lead to success. Observation is also integral to pattern recognition, a process by which the brain identifies familiar structures or repetitions in complex data. In any field, the ability to notice subtle patterns in behavior, outcomes, or processes is crucial to gaining mastery. These patterns often hold the key to solving problems or improving performance. For instance, a chess player can observe the moves of an opponent and begin to predict future strategies based on established patterns of play. In scientific research, careful observation of experimental results leads to new insights and breakthroughs. By sharpening our observational skills, we become more attuned to the small details that distinguish excellence from mediocrity. One of the key benefits of observation in the pursuit of mastery is the ability to learn from mistakes, both our own and others. By observing others' successes and failures, we can understand the underlying principles behind their actions and avoid common pitfalls. In many ways, this allows us to bypass the trial and error phase that often accompanies skill development. A seasoned practitioner, for example, might notice subtle signs of fatigue or tension in a colleague's performance, and by observing and learning from that, they can adjust their own technique preemptively. This observational learning process significantly reduces the time it takes to reach proficiency. Moreover, observation sharpens self-awareness. By taking the time to observe others, we naturally reflect on our own behaviors and thought processes. In social contexts, for example, careful observation of body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions enhances our ability to empathize and respond more effectively. In sports or music, observation allows us to critically assess our own technique, identifying areas of strength and areas needing improvement. This self-awareness drives focused practice, which is essential for mastery. Without observation, we are often unaware of our weaknesses or the nuances that could elevate our performance. Mindful observation, which involves observing with full attention and without distraction, also leads to a deeper understanding of the task at hand. When we observe with presence and intent, we are more likely to absorb valuable information and retain it for future use. This is why experts in any field spend so much time observing others and their environment, whether it's through practice, studying others, or simply absorbing the surrounding context. Mastery is not solely about technical skills, it's about developing a rich understanding of the domain, which can only come through sustained and focused observation. Additionally, observation is key to adapting to changing circumstances. In dynamic environments, whether in business, sports, or personal growth, mastery requires the ability to constantly reassess and adjust based on new information. By observing changing conditions and adjusting our approach accordingly, we stay agile and effective. Observation provides the data we need to make informed decisions, ensuring that our responses remain relevant and effective. In summary, observation is not a passive act, it is an active process of learning, refining, and adjusting. It builds the foundation for mastery by improving pattern recognition, fostering self-awareness, and allowing for the intelligent application of knowledge. Through careful, mindful observation, we gain a deeper understanding of our craft, which ultimately leads to sustained improvement and expertise. In conclusion, focusing on yourself, embracing silence, and practicing controlled speech are all fundamental elements in fostering personal growth and mastering any skill. By managing your attention and seeking internal validation, you can regulate your thoughts and actions to become more resilient and focused. Observation enhances this process, sharpening your ability to learn from your environment and others. When we align these practices with the brain's natural mechanisms, we not only improve our cognitive abilities but also cultivate emotional intelligence, self-discipline, and mastery. Ultimately, these habits create a feedback loop, empowering us to achieve sustained success and well-being.